We're back now at 10 after 8 with more on the man suspected of being the Craigslist killer. 22-year-old Phil Markoff, an engaged medical student, is accused of murder, kidnapping, and armed robbery. NBC's Jeff Rawson has been following this story. He's in Boston this morning. What do they know about this guy, Jeff?
Hey, Matt, good morning. They're just sort of putting this together. What they do know is this is not the typical profile of what you'd expect, a typical profile, I should put it in quotes, of a killer. 22-year-old man, a second-year med student at Boston University. He's engaged to be married. In fact, the couple has a wedding website up right now, counting down the days to their marriage. They're registered. This was, by all accounts, an all-American boy. Good-looking guy. Friends say he was very normal. Went to parties in college, the kind of guy that would be walking around the campus. He has no criminal history as well. That's something else that's very interesting. This is not some kind of sexual offender or a known drug addict or known to police. This was out of nowhere for the investigators.
And exactly how did they find this guy? How'd they manage to track him down?
They say that it was through a couple of ways. I mean, you know, we've been showing you those surveillance pictures. That was important. Police got well over 200 tips they're continuing to follow. But also, they went after him the same way they say he went after his victims, using computers. They tracked him through his IP address. When he logged on, it automatically takes your IP address. They matched that to physical locations. They went and they found him. Same way with his cell phone. In one of those surveillance pictures, you see him typing and texting. They tracked him that way. Police say they've actually been tracking him and following him around for days, watching his every move.
All right, Jeff Rawson. Jeff, thank you very much. James Kehoe was a friend of Philip Markoff's back in college. Today, contributor Dr. Gail Saltz is a psychiatrist, and Pat Brown is a criminal profiler. She's in Washington this morning. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
James, let me give a couple of the ways they're describing this guy. You know, he's a medical student. He's clean cut. He's smart. He's preppy. He's engaged. I mean, so this is more in line with the guy you can imagine, right?
Basically, it couldn't be more accurate. I mean, that's the guy I knew. He's as soon as I met him, he was one of the first people I met when I went to college. I think I even helped him move into his dorm room for a couple hours. But he was one of the first guys that I actually connected with. He was intelligent. Seemed like a nice guy. He was fun. He just wanted to go out, live life, and that's basically what I wanted to do. And that's why we became friends.
So contrast that, Gail, and you wrote a book on this subject. Here's the clean-cut, preppy, engaged medical student with the guy police say was a predator and a cold-blooded killer. These are two very different lives.
They are.
And he's managing to keep them separate at some points.
Completely. And there are people who do lead secret lives. And actually, if they're leading a secret life, this is not an unusual scenario. So, for instance, in the case of like a Foley or a Haggard, that you have urges, intense, maybe sexual urges, violent urges, something you want to do, and you lead a life on the surface that's the complete opposite.
But you see, what a lot of people are probably asking right now, and not with someone like James who was with him in a dormitory for a year or so, but family members, really close friends who see this guy on a daily basis, and the people are going to ask, there must have been warning signs.
Yes.
Why were they missed?
You know, it's very possible they were, and they were subtle enough that they were interpreted as something else. So, for instance, here you have a first-year medical student. That is an incredibly tough, stressful time in any person's life. He's about to get married. That's a tough, stressful time. So if he appeared anxious, fidgety, removed, isolated, a little odd at times.
Well, unless this guy has been doing things like this for 10 years or so, is it safe to assume that something traumatic touched this off?
You know, a lot of stress could have made these urges more unmanageable and made him want to act them out.
Pat, let me just bring you in here, Pat, because one of the things that struck me about this as these crimes were unfolding last week is how quickly and how frequently they were unfolding. This wasn't a guy, whoever did this, if it's Philip Markoff, fine, but this isn't a guy who would commit one crime, go back and cool off for a couple of weeks, and then go out and commit another. There were like 3 crimes in a couple of days here.
Right, Matt. I think we kind of had the reverse that we usually see with serial killers. Serial killers usually have something going wrong in their lives. They've lost their girlfriend, they lost their jobs, and they get angry and frustrated, and they want to get their power and control back, so they go out and kill. I think this guy's kind of the reverse. He's probably a little resentful of the life he's leading, that the pressure he's been under all his life to do this and to do that, to be the medical student, to go to college, to be get married, you follow the path of everybody. And I'm guessing he's probably said things before how he doesn't really like this, but people maybe have ignored a little bit of this. But I think as the impending marriage is coming up, what he's doing is saying, you know, they expect me to do all this stuff. You know, I'm going to do stuff my way. I'm going to have my fun, and they're just not even going to realize what I'm really about.
And Pat, let's talk about the murder element here, because it doesn't seem that is his primary goal here, because unlike a Bundy or a Gacy, if murder were his goal, he would have caused harm to more of these women that he's connected with, correct?
Right, but I don't think his goal wasn't just getting money either. This would not be his reason for doing this. I have heard that his friends have said he was rather misogynist. And so I'm guessing that he has an anger against women, an anger against society, and he's found this particular method which he thinks is fun and enjoyable.
Well, let me interrupt for a second.
We might find out, wait a minute, Matt, we might find out if we look back that there are some other elements of power and control he's used against women, like perhaps date rape or something to that effect.
Well, let's bring James in on that one, Pat, because you know he was there in freshman year. Was there an issue with women?
Right, you know, I would. One of the things that that actually, the more I thought about it, kind of struck me about him was that he was, you know, for all intents and purposes, a guy's guy. I rarely ever saw him, you know, out with a woman. He was always the one that would go out with any of the guys on any given night, which didn't really strike me as, you know, a sign of, you know, misogyny. But the more I think about it, the more I realize, you know, one of the normal things people do in college is, you know, just try to go, you know, find someone of the opposite sex to connect with, and that wasn't something he really seemed to do. And I think, you know, if you combine that with the fact that he was, you know, pre-med, he had, you know, his, I'm not sure, but I believe his father was a dentist or something along those lines. This pressure from his family to succeed in that kind of capacity. And that's something that, you know, in my mind, could make a lot of people snap. You know, you combine that with his potential, you know, misogynist beliefs, and, you know, I could see where this could possibly come from.
Well, I think people actually are often struggling with, I mean, people have lots of fantasies, but they don't necessarily need to act out on them. But some people have some sociopathy, in other words, you know, questionable moral compass, combined with intense urges. And we might find early on in his life he had some traumatic difficulties.
All right, Gail and James and Pat, thank you all. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Matt.